Good morning, everybody. We have a chat with Dan Gingrich today, and Dan is one of my heroes. Dan is one of the greatest horn players I know, and he's also one of the nicest people I know. He's associate principal and honorary principal horn of the Chicago Symphony, and we are going to go live with Dan right now. Let's find Dan on our Instagram viewers. And everyone give a warm welcome to Dan. I know his daughter Dawn is watching from Munich, Germany. Hi, Dawn. Dale Clevenger's watching. Let's see, Mary Barnes Gingrich is watching, I think. We have a lot of people. We're just waiting for Dan to join. Sometimes it takes a minute for these technological things to kind of go through. But I'm really excited for everyone to get to know Dan as a person, and I feel really lucky to have this time with him. Dan, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, David.
Hey, fantastic to see you.
Good to see you. Am I sideways on your screen?
You are sideways.
Let me fix that.
Hey, fantastic.
Okay.
So somebody wanted to say hi. This is Muffy. Muffy.
Oh, well, Mimi is meowing here. She may end up on my lap.
So Muffy is a German cat. She was from Berlin. She came all the way back from Berlin, Germany with me.
Yeah, Mimi is a Russian blue.
Oh, man.
She wants to say hello.
Oh, my gosh.
Say hello.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Oh.
Later.
Is that Dawn's cat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Dawn is all alone in Munich.
Oh, man. She couldn't bring Mimi?
Not yet. Someday we'll work on it. It's a little complicated.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I was really lucky bringing Muffy back. But I didn't know you were a cat person. I heard there's a kind of an interesting story. You had allergies to
Yes, I'm horribly allergic, but surviving. Yes, I grew up dog people. My father raised beagles.
No kidding.
Yep. Yeah, it was one of his passions.
Did he take them hunting, or was he?
Yeah, he did some rabbit hunting, but field trials.
Yeah. No kidding. Wow. So, did you help train them as well?
By the time we had 3 boys in the family, my mom said a pet dog would be enough. So his breeding days were over by then.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't know that. So you grew up in Chicago. You were born and raised here?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. My father came to Chicago from Pennsylvania to study operatic voice.
Really?
And met my mother, who was a pianist and organist, and so yeah, we had plenty of music in the house.
So your mom's family's from Chicago then?
Yes.
Okay. And what neighborhood did you live in when you were growing up?
Stickney, if you really know your Chicago geography.
I'm learning. I don't know yet, but a shout out to Stickney.
Berwyn was a bohemian community, and a lot of us bohemians there in Berwyn.
So by bohemian, you mean Czech?
Czech.
Right? Czech
Yep.
American? Wow.
Yep.
So there are a lot of Czech immigrants, Czech influence in Chicago, and especially the Chicago Symphony.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Civic Orchestra was founded in 100 years ago, just after World War I, when originally Theodore Thomas, his orchestra was almost exclusively German.
Yeah.
But being German wasn't too popular during and after World War I.
Yeah.
And they were really looking to cultivate local talent. That's why the Civic Orchestra was founded.
No kidding.
And yeah, a lot of Bohemians came into the orchestra after the German era.
Yes, yeah. You know, my great grandmother was German, and they spoke German in the home like, almost exclusively until World War One,
Right.
and then it just all immediately stopped.
Had to
Just
stop.
yeah, it spoke English. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad that we lost some of that culture and some of that tradition, but
True enough.
yeah. Um, could you talk a little bit about what it was like to grow up in Chicago at that time? What were some of your passions and pastimes?
Well, of course, my father, the singer, we he sang all the time, and as soon as the kids were old enough to carry a tune, he would harmonize while we carried the tune. Then the next step was it was our turn to harmonize, and this was without reading any music yet.
Wow.
So that kind of training happened a lot in the family court, and in the car where we were captive. It was constant. My mom attempted some piano lessons, but when we started brass instruments, that came to an end.
Yeah, same for me about. So with a quartet singing, I guess it's a quartet. You guys did four-part harmonies.
We've done some of that in my family, and I did that for a while some years ago with Mark Kramer in the CSO and a couple other musicians. Well, David Chickering was in the CSO at that time too. So I think three out of the four of us were CSO members, and we had a quartet. That was lots of fun.
No kidding. I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
do you think that singing with your father and singing with your brothers intuitively taught you how to listen to other people while you were creating a sound?
Absolutely, yeah, and the improvised harmonizations, it led me to just love doing that, and playing the horn, often a middle voice in the orchestra. Uh, it I've always enjoyed being part of an ensemble, not necessarily being a soloist.
Wow. Well, what I noticed is so when I've played with you, you're just able to listen to me and automatically, like intuitively predict what I'm about to do and go with it. And it's so much fun to play with you because we're just right there together. But I hear you do that with other, musicians in other sections. You'll do that with the winds. You'll do that with, and could you talk a little bit about that and how it transfers into the orchestra?
Well, I mean, we hope so. Yeah, but it's all about listening. It's all about chamber music. I mean, unless you're doing an unaccompanied solo, everything we do is chamber music. A
Wow.
symphony orchestra is just chamber music on a very large scale. And yeah, listening is at least as important as making a sound.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I really take from you is just like your ears and your radar are so big. And whenever we get a line in the orchestra, it seems like, yeah, I mean, we're not the first ones usually to play it. It's somewhere
Hmm.
else in the orchestra. And you're so quick at like hearing what they do and imitating it and then doing it. And
Well, I remember, boy, when I first got in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and it was a section full of experienced players, and I was just astounded how they knew how to shape the phrase, how long the notes were going to be, and I felt like I was guessing, and not only was each of them able to do it, they were doing the same thing together, and that's part of getting in the swing of what we do.
yeah. Could you talk a little bit about when you joined? You were the kid in the horn section. You were maybe 22 when you joined.
Yeah, um, uh, it was it was a great time. I had no expectations. I mean, when I took an audition, I never had any expectations, but things worked out, and I had I did have uh, really good training, being in Chicago and growing up here and being exposed to so much here. Maybe that goes back to your first question about what it was like growing up in Chicago. But yeah, well, I guess maybe I should back up.
Yeah.
My school had a tremendous music program. And of course, my father, the singer, but he encouraged brass playing. He loved the brass instruments.
Really?
So what happened was, boy, I'm really backing up. My older brother took up the trumpet.
Okay.
But he brought it home and he demonstrated it, how you make a sound, what the valves do. And by that time, I'd taken enough piano lessons. I was reading music very basically. Wow. But after he explained how the trumpet worked, I think it was a little unclear in my mind whether this was his trumpet or our trumpet. So, because I was fooling around with it constantly.
Wow.
So my father literally on his way home from work stopped at a pawn shop and invested $15 in a mellophone and said, "Here you are, Danny. This one's yours." So I was only in the first grade at that point, but I took to it, enjoyed playing it, figuring out fingerings, and so I got an audition with Mr. Wilkins, the school band director, and he said, "Yeah, okay. If you want to join the band in the first grade, you can do that." So did that. The following year, and I played with, boy, I had cousins in the band. It was great fun. I still have cousins who are musicians, by the way. My cousin Tom, who's a tremendous jazz pianist, cousin Tim, who's a band director, and just in the past year, he has a son now who is also a band director.
No kidding.
Tim's up in Green Bay. His son's in Illinois here. Where was I?
You were talking about you joined the band and you had lots of cousins in the band.
Yeah, Mr. Wilkins was fabulous. Because he was a brass player.
Wow.
I took private lessons with him, and he would stand on the podium during band rehearsals, and it was such a great program. He had 3 bands in the district, 3 different levels, and he would stand on the podium with the baton in one hand. He was a trombone player, but he had a baritone horn that he could play one-handed. So he'd have the baton in one hand and the baritone in the other, and he would play, which is a great way to lead kids.
Yeah.
And so that was just a tremendous experience. Got to high school again. There were 2 bands and an orchestra, and a great music program. And a friend of mine who was a senior when I was a freshman, his name was Dan Busta, and unfortunately we just lost Dan last month. Not Corona related, but Dan struggled with health issues for the second half of his life. But at any rate, he was a great mentor. By the time, of course, he was a senior when I was a freshman. The next year, he was at Roosevelt studying the horn, downtown Chicago. And he came back, he said, "This is an excerpt book." And these are excerpts. There are auditions for the Chicago Youth Orchestra. There was only one Chicago Youth Orchestra at the time. He said, "Look, just learn this material. You're taking the audition." We did that, and then came back and said, "Okay, there's auditions for the Civic Orchestra. Here's the list." And he just insisted that I do that. And so when I was 16, I was playing in youth orchestra and civic, and going to CSO concerts. I should tell you about my very first CSO concert.
Yes, please.
It was Good Friday, so I was able to go to the concert in the afternoon without actually cutting school. And it was Schulte conducting Mahler second.
Wow.
And I was just completely blown away. I remember walking up those stairs to the gallery, and by the time I was walking down the stairs, I thought, wow, I really want to do everything I can to be able to make this my life. I want to do this.
What about it, like captivated you, or what inspired you?
Just the total sound. Remember, I played in band. I love being a member of an ensemble. You put two musicians together, and that's boy, we miss it horribly.
Yeah, we sure do.
During this time where we can't physically be in the same room. But you put two or more musicians together, and the result is always greater than the sum of the parts. And that made an impression on me from childhood. And when I heard the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, it was just overwhelming what the result of all that effort on the stage. And I just had to be a part of something like that.
Yeah, I felt the same way when I heard it. I was just like, I got to do everything in my power to be part of something like that.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's kind of why I've dedicated my life to music, is because it moved me so much that I was like, I want to be in something like that, where a group of 50 to 100 people are all working together, and then making chamber music in this large ensemble and communicating without words. There's really no, and then we play some of the greatest music ever written.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
So what was it like for you after studying? When was the first time you played with the Chicago Symphony? Did you guest as a sub?
I did once, but I was already playing in Rochester.
Okay, so Rochester was your first job?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can
I back up? When did you study with Mr. Brauch?
I did not study with Mr. Brauch.
Okay.
My wife Mary did.
Okay. All right.
So I had met Mr. Brauch, of course, and but I studied with Dick Oldberg. That's another thing that Dan Busta did for me. He said, "You're going to study with Dick Oldberg." So he arranged that, and I studied with Dick Oldberg from the time I was 16 also.
Unbelievable.
And,
what did you learn from Mr. Oldberg?
Quite a lot. Extremely intelligent man.
Yes.
And yes, I mean, but it wasn't just academics. Very musical, and he insisted on memorizing things.
Oh, wow.
Which was good. And
memorizing solo pieces, or your orchestral parts as well?
Well, he made sure you knew, the famous ones for sure, but mostly concertos is what I was referring to. He wanted those memorized.
Oh.
And he didn't believe in warming up.
No kidding.
So yeah.
What was his philosophy?
That's actually pretty helpful if you're at an audition, when you never know what you're going to play or when, and you can't afford to be worrying about it too much.
Wow.
Yeah.
So his philosophy was just you could pick up the horn at any time and just be ready to go.
Yep. Yeah. And fortunately, I did pretty well with that, because I told you my older brother played trumpet. My younger brother ended up playing trombone, and then we were a brass trio. Of course, my father was a singer. My mother was the pianist, and we played in church constantly. And we were invited to other churches, so we were doing all kinds of performing along that line. But there's nothing better. I tell you, if somebody wants audition advice, volunteer to play a solo in church.
Yeah.
You sit there and you have to play cold. So nothing better than that. So when I got to Mr. Oldberg, and he thought you should just be able to pick up the horn and do whatever play anything, I was fine with that.
Do you have a warm-up routine now, or did you carry
Yes.
that?
You know, even Dick, when he got older, he realized, maybe warming up isn't such a bad idea. And
Yeah.
I think we all experience that. Our physical needs change, and you have to stay on top of that.
Yeah, I think for me, just the consistency that you bring, excuse me, every day to orchestral playing. I mean, you're consistently early, like an hour and a half early, which is like, I mean, that's such a gift because I know every time I walk in there, it's like, I'm going to see you first and then I'll see everybody else. But also that same sort of consistent mentality is when you pick up the horn, I just know it's going to be there. I don't doubt it. Does that come from your warm up, or do you have any tips for building consistency?
Oh, well, boy, I don't know. I don't know about tips for building consistency, but you use the term warm up. And I wonder if that just doesn't sometimes mean different things to different people.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah, I think you're right.
you know, warming up for some people is a protracted thing that involves all kinds of exercises and drills, and really more like a workout. That I would term it more of a workout than actually a warm up.
Huh.
Warm up is more like what you really like to do before you do what it is you you have in mind or you're assigned to do for the day.
Oh, wow.
Well, you know, if you think of athletes, they stretch, they warm up, they do drills, they do exercises,
Yeah.
and then they actually get around to playing the sport for real. And they're all different combinations and levels of things.
Oh,
So sometimes I think the terminology itself gets it can be confusing.
yeah.
For me, actually warming up is like the first thing you do. I think the focus just needs to be sound production.
Huh. Okay.
Because sometimes, you know, I wake up in the morning and it's not really happening very well.
I know. Yeah, after like a big day.
So yeah, I think sound production is the first. And I've actually said to people a couple of times lately that uh, don't even try to play in tune at the beginning, because if you're not making the best sound you're capable of making, don't tune that. Wait until you're making a good sound.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's tune that. Now let's play in rhythm. Now let's do everything else we have to do.
Wow.
But I think sound production needs to come first. And so backing up to actually warming up, I think that's step one. Then you can add things. You can add, you know, expanding range up and down and dynamics and whatever else. But just basic sound production should come.
When you focus on the sound, you're focusing on making like an ideal sound, or what do you focus on when you're doing your sound production?
Efficiency, purity, I think are good words to keep in mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I always worry about people who fall in love with the sound of the horn and want to play it because they've fallen in love with the sound. Because our instrument, of all instruments, is the audience hears it indirectly.
Wow.
It's the sound is reflected and it's diffused.
Oh.
And I like to think of it as the player produces sound A.
Yeah.
The audience hears sound B.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you're trying to reproduce sound B, your audience hears a sound C that you didn't necessarily have in mind.
Holy smokes.
So as far as sound production, I think it's important to stick with purity and efficiency and leave it at that.
Wow. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Purity and efficiency. I mean, it's just, for me, you have one of the nicest sounds of any horn player I've ever heard. and it's in it's in
Say.
every note, every register, every dynamic, and it's also at any speed. And I think that's what the difference between a young player and a professional is that they keep that really beautiful sound and they keep it easy through any technicality.
Well, you're very nice. You're wrong, but you're very nice. Thanks anyway.
No, I really, everyone talks about your sound. Could you describe the sound? I mean, well, first of all, when you joined the Chicago Symphony, what was the sound that you heard? Like, what was the Chicago Symphony brass?
This is overwhelming. You know, you got Bud Herseth sitting behind you, and Jacobs on the bottom, and Dale leading the horn section, and you just try to do your part and fit in, and boy, it's pretty intimidating. You know?
Yeah, I know. I know. Trust me. Every day I look around, I'm like, holy smokes, I get to play with you guys. Um,
Yeah.
when you first came to the orchestra, what did you notice about Bud? Like, what was Bud's playing? Like, what was it like?
Um, well, he was just the consummate leader.
Yeah.
You didn't have any choice but to go along with what he was doing.
Yeah.
It was just absolutely definitive, and he knew what he wanted, and he did it. And yeah, you had no choice.
Wow.
Go along.
Wow. I mean, how do you think he came up with those musical decisions? Like, he was like, I want to go here or I want to go there, and this is how I want it to sound. I mean, he had a concept for everything he played. And
Yeah, he was very methodical. I mean, uh, he didn't really let on too much that he was as methodical as he was, but he was.
yes, yeah,
You know, it sometimes, and it's part of performing. You know, it looks like it's off the cuff. You know, sounds easy, looks easy. Boy, it must be easy.
yeah. Wow. I mean, that's kind of one thing I think is maybe more your philosophy when you play. You've really thought about the parts and you've really studied the score, and you clearly know what you want. Could you talk about how you come to those decisions?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with experience.
Okay.
It's very interesting uh, when a conductor comes and we've played the same piece
Mm.
a year or two ago. It's fresh enough in the orchestra's memory. Um, if it's a conductor who is a good leader and knows what they want and they can convey it, everything's fine.
Mm.
If the conductor is a less strong leader,
Mm.
okay, well, let's say a weak leader,
Yes. Yeah.
that previous performance, if it was a really good performance,
Yeah.
the orchestra has a memory of it,
Yes.
and it's hard to move away from the tempi and the way of playing that we all recall from the previous performance, and it becomes obvious after you've been in the ensemble for a few years. You see this happening time after time.
Wow. Wow. Man,
So a good conductor, a good leader can get what they want.
yeah.
But there's not much going on the podium. The previous terrific performance will seep in, and the conductor may have to fight for the tempo he wants and all kinds of other things.
Wow. So I guess the question is, how do we sacrifice our ego so that we can do exactly what the music demands, number one, and number two, what this new conductor is asking? And, because I think for me, when you play, it's selfless. It's number one, what the composer wanted, what's on the page, those details. But then, if the conductor asks you to do something, you're immediately willing to change. And it's really great to see.
Yeah, Again, it's chamber music. It's listening to what other sections do with things. Yeah, and interesting. You mentioned what we see on the page. I, I've been talking to students a lot about that lately, and the difference between what we see visually and what we have to interpret and create orally. The composer leaves us all kinds of valuable clues, things that we can't afford to ignore. At the same time, we have to go beyond that. And there are actually some things on paper that can be misleading, and we have to be very careful about that too. A very obvious example is a crescendo, which is a short crescendo is printed as a wedge, two straight lines.
Yeah.
And very often the crescendo has to be delayed, and most of it has to come at the end, and there's a flair to it.
Yes.
And you know, if the composer actually drew a crescendo the shape they want, it wouldn't be straight lines most of the time.
Wow.
But just for visual clarity, that's the way things are printed. So our eye picks it up and we know that's a crescendo. Doesn't mean that it has to be incrementally gradual, exactly the way it looks visually on the paper. We interpret, and we have to balance that. We have to take the things from the composer that are on the page that we can't afford to ignore, but we can't confuse them with things that are inadequate on the page.
Wow. So when you look at a score, what things really stick out to you as being your first priority when you're looking at a score to study a piece? What are your second, third priorities?
Of course, where the line is.
Okay. Yeah.
Mendelssohn, Scottish Symphony, number 3, Scherzo, third horn, famous orchestral excerpt. Play it on auditions. Well, okay, the tune is but then is not the tune. Mendelssohn doesn't give you a new dynamic at that point. Okay?
Yes.
So
yes.
The right thing to do is to back off when you
Yes.
get the repeated pitch.
Yes.
The non-thematic repeated pitch. But, you know, it just says, fortissimo, go and enjoy it. And so you have to watch for things like that. Where is the line? That's first and foremost. Are you carrying the line? Are you supporting it? Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. Oh, man. Okay, so I would love to back up a little bit. What was your audition like when you got into Chicago Symphony?
You want audition stories?
Yeah.
Actually, I got a couple of good audition stories before that. My first job was in Rochester, second horn, and it was mid-season. So the first horn player, Maurice Econ, called Dale Clevenger, said, "Can you send a few people that you can recommend?" And I was one member of Civic that he suggested, go ahead and take this audition. And they liked the way I played, but I was 19 years old and they were a little unsure if this was a good idea. So they gave me a trial, and they gave me a 2-week trial, and we rehearsed the first program, and after the first concert, Maurice said, you've got the job, we're okay here. So there was always that uncertainty. Actually, there was uncertainty when I auditioned for the National too, which was my next job. That was a third horn audition, and boy, things were different in those days. You know, well, some things were different. Well, great advice is sleep in the city you're going to audition in.
Yes, I think that's a really
Well, that wasn't an option. And, getting time off
yeah.
from an orchestra really wasn't an option then. It was your job. You showed up, you did it. So we had a rehearsal in Rochester the morning of the national audition.
Mm.
So when the rehearsal was over, I drove to the airport. Of course, there was no security. You just walk in, and I didn't have a suitcase even. I just had my horn, got on the plane, flew to Washington, and I actually arrived at the Kennedy Center before the time they had given me in a letter, whatever it was, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. or something.
Wow.
And I walk in the door, and they say, well, the preliminaries are over. And I just stood around for a few minutes, and they came back and they said, well, the committee has decided, since you're actually on time, they'll hear you. So I said, so you're playing now. So, so played my audition. Once again, they thought, this guy's young. Do we want to take this chance? So their idea was, you know how the audition list always says at the bottom, sight reading may be required?
Yes.
Instead of that, to try to get, to gauge whether my training had any depth or not, they said, please play the Tchaikovsky Fifth Solo and the Mendelssohn Nocturne, both from memory.
Wow. Wow.
So I did that.
Yeah.
And they said, okay. So that was my second audition experience. Then in Chicago, okay, that was your question. What was the Chicago audition like? Yeah. Well, again, I didn't have any real expectations. But the one thing I remember, and we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have recordings that were as easy to access as we do today.
Wow.
There was a lot of repertoire I didn't know.
Wow.
And one of the things they asked for that wasn't on the list was played the Dvorak cello concerto between Dale and Dick, sitting in the middle playing second. Okay. And I'd never heard it. I didn't know it existed at that point. But so that made a big impression. I learned it real quick after that.
Unbelievable. And you used probably that radar. You probably just listened to the breathing of everybody, and you just followed along and just played the music, right?
Yeah, just read it and listen as hard as you can and see what you can do.
Unbelievable. How did you find recordings at that time to listen to? I mean, what was your...
Yeah, they were LPs. And again, my friend Dan Busto was at Roosevelt. I ended up at Roosevelt. I was only there 3 semesters, but you'd go to the library and you'd take out the LP and you'd sit down at a turntable with headphones, and you'd taken the score out of the library too, and you follow the score and listen to the LP, and listen to as much as we could, but it was not as easy as it is now.
I mean, I can't help but to think it's almost like we have so much information, so many recordings, so many scores that we're just like, I don't know where to start. And if you just have like 5 albums, you're like, well, I'll just pick number 1 and start there.
Yeah. Wow. The scores are important, though. Yeah. It's very good to see what else is going on in the orchestra.
Yeah. I mean, when you started, did you start with the melody line, the bass line, and then you kind of were like, oh, what's in between?
Yeah. Well, horns are often in between somewhere.
We are. Yeah, that's absolutely right. What did it feel like to win the Chicago Symphony audition for you after?
It felt great.
Yeah.
Of course, but again, I didn't come in with expectations, and then think, wow, I'm going to be playing in a section with my teacher now, and Dale. I played in Civic for 3.5 years with lots and lots of sectionals with Dale, and I'm going to be part of it, and I'm just going to do my best to make my contribution.
Wow. What did you learn from Dale? Like, what memories do you have of, what did you take away from working with him?
Well, his passion for music. You can't miss that. And really, for music more than horn playing, and also the discipline that things have to be right. And whether it's rhythm or listening, and both those things in combination.
Do you have any stories about working with Dale? Anything, any fond memories you could share?
Well, just a general fond memory feeling. I'm very poor at actually dredging up specific stories unless one I'm reminded of something.
Okay. Maybe the times when you did the quartets on the boat. Didn't you do horn quartets with Dale?
Oh yeah. We did an annual. It was a fundraising event on one of the $1 boats. Yeah.
Was that the architectural tour boats that go in Lake Michigan and the Chicago River? And we'd get on the microphone and tell stories. And
oh yeah.
Yeah, those are really fun.
Yeah, those are fun.
Could you talk about what it was like the first time you played Mahler 5 with the Chicago Symphony?
Do you know this story already?
I don't.
First time I played Mahler 5. We used to do a series of 10 concerts in Milwaukee, Monday nights. And we had a chartered train from Chicago to Milwaukee, to and from. And Schulte was doing a Milwaukee concert. And I don't know what the issue was. I don't remember if the soloist was unavailable for the Monday, or he didn't like the program, or whatever it was. He just decided, instead of doing the program we did in Chicago, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we're going to do Mahler 5 in Milwaukee. That was my first Mahler. There was no rehearsal.
Wow. And what was that like to
all I had to do was follow along. Everybody else knew it.
Yes. I mean, it was kind of a calling card of the Chicago Symphony. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you probably heard them play Mahler 5 in Orchestra Hall while you were in Civic, right? Maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. What was Bud like before he started Mahler 5? What did he do backstage? What did he do as his warm up? What did he do on stage? I mean, that's kind of like, starts with the trumpets.
Yeah. Boy, I don't remember much in the way of specifics. He did his warm up, and he took care of his own business. I mean, you didn't bother him much before concert.
Yep, that's good advice.
But,
what was that opening like? Can you recall?
From the first note, you're drawn in. You're there. I mean, you got to be with him because he just, that's what he did. He led. He drew everybody in, and it was you couldn't help yourself.
Wow.
Inexorable. Yeah.
Wow. Unbelievable. And of course, probably those moments with Mr. Jacob.
Yeah.
Just the human voice on the tuba. Right?
Yeah. So vocal, so singing. I having been there way back then and here now, I just wonder. I've often wondered what it would have been like to have Muti as music director and Jacobs at the same time, because Muti's approach is so vocal, and Jacobs' approach was so vocal that it would have been fun and interesting.
It sure would have. Could you talk a little bit about Mr. Jacobs? Did you study with him at all?
I didn't study with him per se.
Okay.
You know, we'd talk about things. You know, in spite of the way people see him as so knowledgeable about all kinds of detail and analysis, he didn't want to go there if it wasn't necessary.
Huh.
You know, his philosophy was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Wow.
And keep it simple. Wind and song, or song and wind, however you want to look at it. And you know, again, the song part was assumed.
Wow.
Okay, you're going to play this instrument, but it's assumed that you're capable of singing, that you're capable of you know, of singing a phrase, and really the simplicity of his approach generally was more obvious than all the detail about breathing.
Wow.
Or anything else.
I think that's the mark of a great, I mean, true genius is where you can see this thing that's super complicated and then break it down to its simplest form. I mean, someone like an Einstein or a Stephen Hawking can take these, you know, complex theories and then distill them for someone like me.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I can't do Einstein or Stephen Hawking, but you know, I could definitely do someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson. He understands all this.
Yeah.
Physics.
Well, it reminds me of what we were talking about with Otto yesterday, about playing basketball.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about the position of my hands and my feet and what each part of my body is doing when you're playing the game.
Yeah.
You're just playing the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just thinking about, okay, there's the hoop. Let me see if I can get the ball in the hoop. All right, there's a guy. Let me just see if I can move around this guy somehow. You're just trying different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, mentally and physically, you're drawing on a lot of experience while you're doing that.
Yeah.
But you're just playing the game.
Yeah. Fantastic. What was it like to work with Mr. Schulte?
Schulte was fiery, and he loved contrast.
Really, yeah.
And but he was hard on himself, I think.
Oh.
I mean, in a good way. I mean, he really worked hard. He was very consistent. He was very aware of tempo. Of course, that's the conductor's job. But he wanted to be consistent, and he was.
Yeah.
You know, the stage manager times everything we do, and Schulte would do Mahler symphonies an hour long, and he was never more than 5 or 6 seconds off from one night to the next.
No kidding.
Of course, then Barenboim was the next music director, and he was very much about leaving things open and open to new interpretation every night.
Yes.
And he could be 10 or 12 minutes off. But two different approaches, but you know, very successful, very musical.
Do you think the sound of the orchestra changed from Schulte to Barenboim eras?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, just the way a conductor looks. Of course, you know, with the disclaimer, we do get conductors on the podium who aren't very convincing, shall we say, and they don't influence the orchestra's sound.
Oh.
But conductors who are convincing, just the way they look, the way they move,
Wow.
Creates a different sound in the orchestra.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, a hard motion could make like a hard sound. A,
Absolutely.
a subtle gesture could really make a really warm, rich. I think Tink is one of the best examples of those for me that I've worked with. Like those gestures that are just so relaxed and organic. He pulls the sound out of the orchestra.
Yes. Yep.
You worked with Maestro
Very,
Tink.
very natural.
Yes.
Very natural. Not contrived.
So we have about 10 minutes left. I really want to just ask you about what you would like to tell young musicians who are joining a section full of people who have, or young musicians who are joining a group full of senior members. What advice would you give to them, having had that experience yourself?
Well, I was lucky because I respected everybody in there, and I think you have to respect the older players, which I'm saying to you.
I do. It's
Pardon
easy
me
with
for
you guys.
that.
It's easy
She's
with you
the
guys.
cat's tail here if she's in the picture. Um, yeah, I had utmost respect for the others, and I just wanted to fit in and do my part, make my contribution, and I don't know. I hope that's what people do. We talk about the chamber music thing, and I hope folks really take that to heart. It's great to play solos. I enjoy playing solos. You obviously do, but it's just chamber music on a large scale, and we make our contribution, and then enjoy the experience because the the result is going to be greater than the sum of the parts, and it's a fabulous experience.
We have some of the best seats in the house for the best music.
Absolutely.
When you say contribute, I really think the word giving comes to mind, and
Sure.
that's a word that I would think of when I think of you. It's just
Oh, well,
incredibly giving with, your music. You give all. You always do your best. I just think giving.
I play in a section that does the same thing.
Yeah.
Uh, Everybody's fabulous. Everybody in the section can do anything, and any one of them could play any part, and it would be great. And uh, it's just wonderful to work in a section that works together that way.
Wow. I'd love to just hear about the experience of you recording the Brahms Trio with Dawn, your daughter.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was, this is her, by the way.
That's Dawn. Oh.
That's a painting my wife made. Uh, Mary has never let more than 2 years go by without doing a portrait of our daughter Dawn.
Oh, wow.
So this one is entitled 5.5.
Oh.
And yeah, recording the Brahms. Well, we played it quite a bit before we recorded it, obviously. Just a fabulous experience for a parent. I can't imagine anything more fulfilling.
Wow.
And
Yeah, to see your daughter go from that picture behind you to now a colleague and someone who, whose musical voice you respect. And
yeah, even that recording, I mean, it's more than 10 years old now, but that was just a wonderful project.
wow.
We had the time of our lives.
Yeah, you always have those memories of making music together and, collaborating together. And it's still in your family from the beginning when you started with singing with your dad to now playing with your daughter. It's just so special to see how that music transfers through your family, through the generations.
Well, it has been, yeah. That doesn't always work that way, Not everybody turns out to be a musician, but we didn't force her. She insisted.
Wow.
We knew she had some ability. She had this little golden golden book of songs or hymns, whatever it was. And at some point, we realized she had the thing memorized, cover to cover. You know, it had a dozen songs in it or something. And then one day, Mary realized, wow, she not only has it memorized, she moves from key to key, from one song to the next.
Come on.
One would be in C, she'd go up a step, the next one was in D. She had that memorized. So, and well, what happened was when Dawn was born, Mary had a wonderful career freelancing on the horn. She played extra with the CSO, the opera, Milwaukee. She played.
I have.
Oh yeah, she's conducting now. Yes, I live with the most creative person I've ever dealt with. Well, I don't know. Maybe Leonard Bernstein is more creative, but
that recording of you playing. I just have to stop real quick. That recording of Shostakovich 7 on that third movement, your low horn playing is the top low horn playing I've ever heard, man. It's that.
I loved playing fourth horn, and then I've been so privileged to be able to play several positions, high and low in the orchestra, and it's like multiple careers within one career. It's been a great ride. But fourth horn is fabulous fun.
He said you were the best low horn player he's ever heard, and I think that's right. Really quick, could you finish about your wife Mary? You just said she's the most creative person you've ever met, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you on that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was listing the things she's done, extra with the CSO, opera, Milwaukee Symphony. Broadway shows, King and I with Yul Brynner, My Fair Lady with Rex Harrison, you name it. Lots of jingles here. Used to be a big jingle industry, recording commercials and things. And she had a great career doing that. When Dawn was born, which is what I was getting at, she took a hiatus and she was playing piano, accompanying a friend's Suzuki classes. Well, so our daughter attended these things from the time she was in diapers. And she just desperately wanted to play the violin because she saw all these kids playing Suzuki violin and having fun with it. So we eventually let her do that. Wow. But yeah, we live in a creative household here.
Wow. I mean, I can just tell you're so proud of Dawn, and you know she's in Munich right now. So just hi to Munich, and I know we can't physically be there right now, you and I together, but and I know Dawn's in Germany, but we're all connected with music, and we're all connected through the spirit. Lastly, could you just talk about how music is so important right now?
Absolutely. You know, we're going through an extraordinarily difficult time. And we're talking, Mary and I are talking about things that people will want to retain from this time. People have been forced to drop out of the rat race, and they have more time for their families and time for lots of things that they haven't had time for. And they're going to want to hang on to those things. But there are also things that we're missing.
Yeah.
And I think music and experiencing it the way, the genuine way where people are able to get together in the same room, on the same stage, playing together, live music. I really believe people are missing that. I know I am, but I think a lot of people are really gaining a new appreciation for what they're missing right now.
Wow.
And I think and hope there will be tremendous demand when we are out of this.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that's so important for the spirit, and it's so important for our souls. And honestly, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you again for coming on the Fireside Chat. It's just really great to get to know you and your story and to hear some of your insights on playing the horn. And I can't wait to be back to work and share the stage with you again.
Great to see you and hear you, David. Yep, it's been too long.
Hey, thank you again. I'll see you soon. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you for watching, and hi all over the world. All right. Thank you.